Joining us live from Helsinki is Director of the Finnish Literature Exchange, Iris Schwanck. Dr. Schwanck holds a PhD from the University of Helsinki and also studied in both Paris and Brussels. She worked as the Deputy Director at the Center of International Mobility and as Director for the Finnish Cultural Institute in Paris. Since 2001, she has been the Director of the Finnish Literature Exchange. She is currently leading Finland as guest of honor at the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2014. So I'd like to welcome Iris and thank you for joining us. I will turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Christy, and hello from Helsinki to Viva Canada Books. Thank you very much for inviting Finnish Literature, Finnish Publishing to be introduced to you. I'll see you through the Finnish editors' scene and market and the reading habits and how to sell and buy books and how to sell rights to Finland. And finally, I'll tell you a little bit about my organization, Finnish Literature Exchange, and of course the Frankfurt Book Fair Guest of Honor project that is called Finland.cool. So let's get started. Well, I have to start with the Finnish Publishers Association, of course, a little description of it. It was established already in 1858, and it is the oldest branch association in our country. To start with, it had 19 members, out of those only 6 publishers. Today, there are more than 100 members in the society, in the association. And, of course, it is extremely powerful in publishing and selling titles. 80% of commercially published titles are done by the member publishers, and 75% of book sales is covered by those publishers as well and by their products. The services of the association are those normally of the National Publishers Association, general lobbying of the profession, especially important nowadays. I'll come back to this a little later. Of course, it supplies also advice and support in legal and other business matters. It gathers all kinds of statistics concerning the field and other information on publishing. The association organizes all kinds of training sessions, stage and continuous education for the profession. The association is also a Helsinki Book Fair associate. Helsinki Book Fair is being the most important book fair in Finland with some 100,000 visitors every year in October, 2 weeks after Frankfurt. It is, as I said, a readers' festival, a readers' book fair, but there are more and more international publishers joining the fair as well. And the fair has also a system of guest of honor countries this year. This year's guest of honor is Italy. Well, the association has, of course, also very active international relations. It is member of the Förläggarrådet, the Nordic Publishers Association, having a couple of meetings and also continuous education programs for the Nordic colleagues. And when we speak of Nordic countries, that covers, of course, all the 5 Nordic countries, being members of the Nordic Council of Ministers, but also the so-called regions like the Faroe Islands and Greenland. It's a small publishing field, but still important. Then the association is a member of the Federation of European Publishers and the International Publishers Association, IBA. The association runs also common stands at Frankfurt and at Bologna Book Fair, together with us, the Finnish Literature Exchange. The Publishers Association members, they pay naturally a membership fee, and the The importance of the fee depends on the number of new titles and the annual book sales, the smallest fee being 500 euros a year, so very, very modest. I would like to mention some of the oldest Finnish book publishers, the Finnish still active today. The Finnish Bible Society was established already in 1812, Finnish Literature Society in 1831. It was really then the Finnish Literature Society then and even now very, very important in enhancing the creation of Finnish language as the language of not only of publishing but also of literature in general, of administration and commerce. It published very early, already at the end of the 19th century, in Finnish language, all the major classics of the world, the Cervantes and Dante and Shakespeare, and all this was published by the Society in translation, because it was understood very early already that you need to have literature in translation in order to establish the literary and really true language of various expressions. Edita is being specializing in learning materials ever since its creation in 1859, and Gunnmelus is really a general publisher since 1872. It publishes mainly fiction these days and also non-fiction books. The Publishers Association, established together with the Ministry of Education in 1983, something that is called the Finnish Book Foundation. It was established in order to give literary awards to authors. That was also considered important not only in order to put forward important authors and books that year, but it was also considered that this important literary prize in every country is also commercially very important and viable. There are two categories in this Finlandia prize: fiction, non-fiction, and children, and juvenile books. And each of these prizes are worth 30,000 euros. And of course, every year the prizes are very much followed by the media, and people buy those books. So it has also a very important commercial impact in sales of books. Then there's the Little Finlandia prize that is given to most talented young student at college level for text. And then there are also a couple of prizes given to translators of Finnish literature, both fiction and non-fiction. If you encounter those names, you can immediately deduce that those authors who have gained these prizes are very important and very successful ones. Well, a few words about the Finnish book market. There are 5,000 new publications every year, and of the first editions, quite a few are translated fiction, 340 titles, 575 titles, children's and juvenile and children's books, and almost 100 young adult books. The population in Finland is 5.5 million inhabitants, and the turnover of the publishing business is 254 almost million euros. In Finland, like in all the other countries, publishing and book selling is going through a crisis. Last year, we had a diminution of almost 4% of the sales. And, well, it's something that is going down slowly but steadily. 7% of this turnover totally represent digital products, which is very, very little. Out of the sales, we can see that it is divided by three sections: 1/3 educational books, 1/3 non-fiction, and 1/3 fiction. I mentioned that the members of the Publishers Association are a little bit more than 100 publishers, but there are almost 6,000 operating publishers in Finland, meaning, those publishers who publish maybe 1 or 2 titles a year, or not maybe every year a book. But in this number are also including those publishers who work within the university or in the public administration and so on and so forth. So all these publishers, they publish over 20 million books in Finland. There are all in all like 10,000 releases per year in the book production. It means that we have a leading position in Europe compared with the number of books per capita that are published. We can see that there are almost more or less 20% of translations out of these books. This number is also getting smaller every year since we read more and more domestic authors and Finnish authors, but still 20% is quite a lot. And out of these translations, 60 until 70% are translated from English. This is phenomenon that is familiar in many other countries as well. We could read today in the newspapers an article about the situation of translated literature in the English-speaking area, especially. We are talking about 2 or 3%, therefore different tendencies. But still, it is a very topical question, how much we read and buy and publish books in translation, also in Finland. Out of book sales, we can see that the breakdown of which genre is covered by how many percentages, more than 15% fiction, children, also very important. Comics is a growing genre in Finland. They are biggest publishers who are doing comics as well, and maybe not that commercial. And of course, very small avant-garde publishers who do comics as well. But it is a growing genre in Finland, also internationally speaking. Educational material, always very important, 39%, and non-fiction, of course, more than 30%. In 1995, there were 15 million copies sold, compared with 23 million copies in 2013 last year. That means that every Finnish adult buys 5.2 books a year, which is quite a lot. About the book sales, another word again. The fixed pricing was demolished already in 1971, so you can find the same book sold with very different prices in a professional bookstore, in a chain, or in a supermarket, or in a kiosk, or at a railway station. This, of course, is very demanding for small bookstores and small publishers and so on, but still this is the system. Another thing that is astonishing and that has a very important effects on the market is the fact that the value-added tax for printed products is 10%, as it is for e-books 24%, which is really completely different figure. In Finland, there are 450 booksellers compared with more than 600, like some 5-6 years ago. We have bookshop chains, big chains that are part of big publishing houses. So the book market, selling, producing, publishing are in the same hands. This is a phenomenon that is quite new. 31% of books are bought in bookshops, 18% in department stores, and 6% over the internet. We had still some, let's say, some 10 years ago, very, very big and active book club activity, but this is getting smaller and smaller. there are Finnish publishers. Some of them I would like to present to you. Biggest ones, most important ones who buy rights. So this is the important point of view here. Ottawa is a very old, prestigious house, the biggest really Finnish-owned house. And I have put here also in your material the publishing directors and those who are responsible in buying rights. Minna Kastveen is responsible here. It's a very interesting publisher for translated titles with special series for quality fiction and so on. WSOY and Tammi are both part of Bonnier Publishers these days. Bonnier bought WSOY, the other very big Finnish house, 2 years ago, and now they are part of the same conglomerate. Both WSOY and Tammi, who have both their own publishing strategies and own publishing identities, they are very, very active also in buying rights. Tammi, I would like to mention because they excel in children's and juvenile books. And Tammi has also a very prestigious series of translated literature called the Yellow Library that was established already in the 60s. Finland is a bilingual country, also like Canada, with 2 national languages. And of course, we have also an very active Swedish-speaking publishing and publishing business and excellent authors. Finland Swedes represent like 5.5% of the entire population, but the importance of the literature written in this language and its position in our literary and cultural field really exceeds these 5.56% really very strongly. The biggest Finland-Swedish publisher is Schilds and Söderströms, called Vets. It's much easier, and they buy also rights and licenses, less than the other ones, but still it's worth remembering. Gummerus is another one of the oldest publishers actually in Finland, and they are quite interested in translated fiction as well, especially fiction, and also in titles written in French, because Anna Bayer is a Romance philologist that has lived a long time in Paris and knows very well the literature written in this language, and is apropos also a publisher of Gaetan Susi. Siltala Publishing is a very interesting another house, a smaller house, specializing a lot in translated literature. They used to work both the publishing director and the director for nonfiction. Nonfiction literature used to work for WSOY and established a new house like 5-6 years ago. Absolutely name to remember, and so is Teos, who is that is a very modern and very ambitious publishing house. Like in many countries, the publishing industry is centered in the capital area. So here in Finland, Athena is one of the rare publishers who are located in another city, in Jyväskylä, which is a university city in the central part of Finland, and also buying titles, both fiction and non-fiction. In Finland, we have a system where the author, she can write both fiction or non-fiction, is very faithful to the publisher and to the editor, and remain in the same house for ages, and in many cases for the whole career. This is changing a little bit, of course, but we don't have literary agents in Finland like in the Anglo-American area, for instance, where the agent represents the author for all different publishers and selects the publisher who is at that time the most important one for this very author. In Finland, literary agents do exist. We have two very active ones here, but they are there only to sell rights of their authors to foreign publishers. And this is really very typical here. The authors, as I said, are taken care of by the publisher for the editing, marketing, and everything else. It's a little bit like the situation in France still, that this link and this relation is really very, very deep and tight. International scouts are active here as well, of course, selling rights to Finnish publishers. I think you all share the same scouts, but there's also a very strong link here. Then I would like to stress the importance of translators, those who translate into Finnish or in some cases into Finland Swedish. They work really as almost as agents, as scouts in any case, towards the publishers who listen very carefully what they say, what they recommend, and what their opinions are. Here's the website to the Translators Association, where you can identify translators of fiction, non-fiction written in English or in other language towards Finland with their CVs and so on. I think the role of translators is very important for those called smaller language areas where there are so very little publishers who can read our languages or communicate in our languages. So this is something absolutely to remember. And also in Finland, like anywhere else, the personal contacts between publishers and networks are really very, very important. One word about Canadian literature in Finland. Well, of course, there are all these big names that have been translated into Finnish and that have been published by the major publishers and that are very well appreciated: Alice Munro, Jan Martel, Margaret Atwood, Cara Shields, and so on. But there's a lot to be discovered, of course, and learn about Canadian literature. There's a big interest here towards Canada because we somehow, Finland and Canada, I think, although we are completely different in terms of size and population and all that, we share the same climate and feeling of nature and so on. So there's a lot to learn and find out. A few words about Finnish Literature Exchange that was established already in 1977, actually. We are the oldest European-based organization promoting our literature abroad. We are an NGO. We are very far from the political decision makers, which is really an advantage for a player like we are. Our task is to promote Finnish literature abroad. We give subsidies for foreign authors, for foreign publishers when they buy Finnish rights to cover the translation costs. We organize promotional tours for our authors when they are published abroad and so on. We invest a lot in further educating and encouraging identifying translators because there are not that many of those. We calculated that during the 5 past years there have been 650 participants in our translator seminars and residency programs and who have benefited from our travel grants and so on and so forth. So this is something that nobody else is doing. It is really our niche there to take care of our translators. And it's a privilege, of course. We are so dependent on them. Then we organize International Editors Week twice a year. The Winter Week, those who are the bolder ones who are not afraid of our climate in February. And then another one in August, so that during the 4 last years we have invited 100 international editors here to Helsinki. It is an opportunity to meet their colleagues in Finnish publishing houses, Finnish publishers outside the very busy book fairs, and of course we provide also them with a cultural program and with culinary and all these experiences. And these editors during this visit. They meet individually their Finnish counterparts and some Finnish authors and so on. So it might be a very interesting way to getting to know our publishing world. We are not at all concentrating on Europe. We've had guests from all over the place, really. And of course, we are talking there about selling and buying rights and licenses. It is not at all only a one-way trip. Then we represent Finnish publishing industry and Finnish authors at international book fairs, professional book fairs in Angoulême, in France for comics, Bologna for children, juveniles, and we are also in London and in Göteborg, in Gothenburg in Sweden, which is the main, also the professional book fair in the Nordic countries, where many publishers come just before Frankfurt to buy the Nordic rights or sell rights here. And then, of course, we are every year in Frankfurt together with the Publishers Association. Our main task is to promote Finnish literature abroad and to support these activities, but we have also translation grants program for Finnish publishers when they buy foreign rights like Canadian rights. These grants are much smaller. I mean, the total number of these grants is much smaller than those and the other way around, but still they are very important for Finnish publishers and of course for foreign publishers as well. These grants cover fiction, all possible genres in fiction, non-fiction, but not scientific literature. The books that are subsidized, they need to be of high quality and not bestsellers. We very often give grants to smaller publishers and not to these biggest houses. This happens as well, of course. It depends on the application and on the work in question. Finland is now the guest of honor at the Frankfurt Book Fair. And it was, of course, the work and lobbying work that took years. But here we are now, and we have been prepared this very, very, very big event for almost 5 years now. We signed a contract with the Frankfurt Book Fair already in 2011. And our main goal is to have more Finnish titles translated, not only in the German-speaking area, but all over the world, of course. It is the German Book Fair, as we very well know, but really a global fair for professionals. When we started, we thought that 100 new Finnish titles in German would be just very ambitious. I'm sorry, I misspelled here. We have now 130 new Finnish titles in German, not in English, but in German, of course. So we have really achieved our goal. These are completely new translations and new titles. Together with paperback publications and new editions and books on Finland, we will have more than 200 new books in the bookshops in the German-speaking area. The fact that we are there as guest of honor this year has, of course, a wider influence in other countries. So we can boast 34 titles in English this year. Normally there are maybe something between 3 and 5 titles published in the English-speaking area here. In German, there are normally something like 40 titles published every year. And we understood that this is a very special year. Next year there's going to be less titles, but we aim to have some 70, 80 titles in German every year after this book fair. Here's the side of our campaign site, where I wish you welcome. Tervetuloa, välkommen. We have the Finnish pavilion, the big Finnish pavilion at the forum area, and a happy hour every day at 5 p.m. for international publishers. In this context, I would like to mention that we are going to publish the Finnish issue of Granta, new Finnish young authors, on the 8th of the book fair, the Wednesday of the book fair at 5 p.m. as well. So you are all cordially welcome to find out about new Finnish best authors. Here, I don't know, maybe we could look at it at the end. There's a link to our trailer, Finland.abc, a funny little trailer made by students of the Aalto University, but this link doesn't work here, I'm afraid, but this digital set is going to help us with this, so let's go further on. A few words about literature in Finland in general. As I said, we are a country with 2 national languages, and we have a literary expression, of course, in those 2. We have a very short literary history of Finnish literature. The first novel was published in 1870, the year when Baudelaire published his Fleur du Mal, I think. The first Finnish novel is called The Seven Brothers, and it's all about reading. How reading without reading, writing skills, you cannot become a full citizen. You cannot master your own destiny. You can't even marry. So this is a Bildungsroman that has been, of course, translated into very many languages, and a new English translation is on its way. Another major factor in the world literature are the Finland-Swedish modernist poets in the 1920s. Very important voices in German literature. The only people that are really indigenous in Europe are the Sami people, those who live in Lapland in the Nordic countries, and they have the status of minority language in Finland, and they have also a literary production, a very small one, of course, but important, that complements our domestic multiculturalism. Then we have, of course, new literary expressions. I already mentioned the comic scene, which is very active and plural and interesting. Also, we have very strong experimental poetry scene and authors who are combining different genres and different art forms as well. Well, Finland is we are very eager at reading. 1 in every 6 Finns adult Finns aged between 15 and 79 buys at least 10 books a year. And this represents these people who buy so many books, represent over half of the books sold altogether in our country. 3/4 of the population buy at least 1 book a year, which is remarkable. And 75 Finns read books. And 70% read books for their children. And in Finland, it is quite easy to have this model of a reading man, a reading parent, of course, but a reading man especially because every other day, every other evening in families, the turn to read to children goes from the mother to the father and back. It was the last survey that was done over the reading habits of Finns mentioned that every Finn reads 45 minutes every day. And when we say that, reading means reading books or reading newspapers or reading something on your iPad and so on. This figure has diminished, so every Finn reads only 35 minutes every day, but still it's quite a lot. We have a very extensive and very famous library system. The law says that every municipality needs to have a public library. It can be a fixed, it can be a central branch library, it can be a mobile library. but you can find libraries in Finland everywhere, even a library boat. In Helsinki, we have those library bicycles, and we are going to bring to Frankfurt a library sauna, so you're welcome to have a sauna bath in the library in October this year. 40% of Finnish people are very active users, meaning that they visit the library twice a month. Libraries nowadays are not only places where you can read and have books and all that, but you can lend all kinds of things for making sports or even a sewing machine or all kinds of things that I really like, cultural centers where people come and meet each other and have also a social life. New acquisitions that are spent for buying books for public libraries represent 300 euros per capita, which is quite a high number. The Finnish public libraries, thanks to them, it is also possible to have library grants to make it possible for authors and translators to make their living and to guarantee their active creative work as well. Well, we are of course facing a new future for literature in all our countries. There's a new homogeneity to be seen, and that is related to books that are translated more and more from English. As I said before, in 1960 there were 292 books translated from English, and in 2010, 50 years later there were 1,600 and even more from English. International bestsellers tend to be the same all over the globe. Stieg Larsson, 50 Shades of Grey, J.K. Rowling, they are translated and bought everywhere by millions and millions. Or most important, I mean, most known author, most translated author these days is Sophie Oksanen. And when you look at these books and these authors, they are always very often represented to the public, to the reading public and other public also in other art forms. There are films and TV series and whatever made out of these books and out of these stories. So they seem to be everywhere and all over the place at the same time. Well, bestsellers lists are always very interesting, and the numbers, the figures are also, they vary from country to country. In Finland, a bestseller sells 30,000 copies. Most successful authors sell between 100 and 150,000 copies, which already is really enormously much in our country. I looked at the top 10 translated fiction this July, a couple of months ago, and it was interesting to see that there were very big volumes. The Joël Dicker, La Vérité sur l'affaire Henri Kébert was number 1, and number 3 was The Goldfinch from Donna Tartt. And you can see in the bestsellers lists in Finland, when it comes to translated fiction and domestic fiction, that it's a very interesting combination of genre literature and quality literature always. Well, the bestsellers list, a couple of comments from 2013. Dan Brown's Inferno and Lisa Marklund, Khaled Hosseini, they were the most successful ones with those figures, 60,000, 40,000 examples sold, copies sold. In domestic fiction, you can see the same type of sold copies. And there again, both genre fiction and quality fiction. Well, everybody is concerned about publishing in the future. How do we publish? And also how do we sell? How do we read? And we are really in a very interesting situation right now. But it can be still said that Finland is the promised land of print media. The book is still the absolutely most prestigious gift, not only for Christmas as Christmas present, but for your birthdays and for Mother's Days and Father's Days and so on. So everybody gives the book, and books are very well received as well. Finns read also their newspapers in paper form, more and more, of course, in net versions, but still, almost every family gets the morning newspaper at home. But what is really very interesting in the country that was very known and still probably is for curiosity and its excellence in IT technology is really behind every other country in the sales of e-books and producing e-books. Less than 1% of the sales represent the e-book form. And of course, it is we can blame partly this fact, the added value tax, which is 24% for e-books. And another thing is that there are no suitable one or two tablets or reading devices for these books, partly because Amazon is not at all interested in smaller language areas. You cannot, for instance, buy or download books in Finnish or Swedish in your Kindle and so on. And what is really important and interesting is that the e-books have not compensated the loss in print media as is the case in the US and more and more in other countries as well. Well, there are enormous challenges, of course, publishing in the future everywhere. Intellectual property rights, how we deal with them. We are following everybody the quarrel or the discussions between Amazon and Hachette and authors and all that. Very important issue in Finland as well. New developments in technology. I said that the devices are really very, how should I say, the making process still here, and this is really a hindrance to this part of publishing. Then the teaching materials, which represent more than 30% of the sales here in Finland. There are enormous changes in schools. Teaching language. There's a lot of discussion about should more material be taught in English, not only at the university level but already at the college level. The reading habits of all of us are changing very quickly. But what is really interesting is the fact that Finland's youth maintains still an interest in books and in fiction in particular. There was a big article today in our biggest daily newspaper about the differences between the reading habits between girls and boys, and it appears that it's a problem in every country, of course, that boys read less than girls, but it is especially important, this gap here in Finland. So authors are invited to write books that might interest also little boys and little boys that are so very geared towards the internet and the IT and sports and so on. So this is a very big issue here as well, much more than even a couple of years ago. Then non-fiction literature, is in a difficult situation. These are the internet and Wikipedia and also and so on. It's a big issue what will happen with non-fiction books in the future. So I think all these big questions are shared globally and in every country. Well, you will get more information about what I said now on our webpage, on our campaign page for Guest of Honor in Frankfurt project.